who can benefit the most from the NFL Combine. Now, a lot of people know how I feel about several different players, coming out. So I kind of give you a couple, and the main one is Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, the running back. And I think in a very, very deep running back class, I mean, you got the Taj Brooks and Trevor Etienne and the Marion Hampton, Ollie Gordon, Caleb Johnson, Phil Maffa from Clemson, Damian Martinez, RJ Harvey, of course, Cam 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗶𝗶𝗀𝗀, Ashton Jeanty. We don't need to mention those. Those guys are pretty much understood. But Rocky Raheem Sanders, Devin Neal, Woody Marks from USC. Then you got Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins over from their time at Ohio State, right? So there is a lot of different, a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent that goes into this. So, but I think Dylan Sampson's one of those guys, like when you watch Tennessee play all year, of course, one of the things about their whole team was like their defense was so good all year long. Especially up front. And we talked about James Pierce enough. Like, I think he's the best defensive player in this draft until proven otherwise, once we do, a little bit more of our homework. Again, homework as in, let's make sure that everything that we saw throughout the season shows up on the all 22, right? We watched hundreds of games this year. I always say all the time that I think that one of the things that I especially like to do is watch the games that nobody else is watching. For example, like Corey Kiner from Cincinnati. Not a lot of people know about Corey Kiner, the running back out there, and how good that he actually was, right? But not a lot of people are watching the Cincinnatis of the world or the Fresno States and things like that. When it gets really late, they tend to shy away from those games if it's not Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, stuff like that. And then when it comes around this time, then everybody becomes an overnight expert, and it's just like, I don't think a lot of people know what they're talking about when it comes to a lot of these players. But Dylan Sampson's, I think, is the most NFL ready running back in this whole class. And when it comes to the NFL Combine, he's going to be one that gets put up very, very high on the charts for a lot of people because of his skill set. Not only can he do everything good, has stayed fairly healthy over his career up until, of course, playing in the college football playoff. I think he only played like 2 snaps and then he was out for the game, which ultimately you would love to have seen, a guy like him so early playing that game to see what could have been for Tennessee, because I think 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 I think he was I think he won running back of the year in the SEC, if I remember right. But just his whole skill set. I mean, I think he sees the field better than anybody in college football. And it was, to me, it's very reminiscent of what Ollie Gordon was last year, but on steroids, because I think he has a great size. I think in open space, nobody catches him. Couple different traits that like we saw even for like the Amarion Hamptons of the world, right? Like, the one thing I saw when he was at Cleveland High School, and I've been talking about Amarion for years, is that learning that twitch, like, let me spin move to get around the tackle, or while I'm getting tackled, because usually when you spin, you're usually going to fall forward just by your momentum of being tackled, right? And that's one of those things that you can't teach as, like, you know, a coach. You're not going to be able to teach that skill set. It's either you have it or you don't, and it can be unlocked. But I don't think you're going to be able to teach a high school senior to do that unless that's just a skill set that he hasn't acquired yet that he can really perform. And Jason says, I like Woody Marks and Caleb Johnson. Well, I mean, I would ask why. Why do you like those guys? I'm very curious on like why people like the players that they like. Woody Marks, yeah. I mean, of course, we remember Woody being, what was his name? Started with a J. He had his before they started calling Woody. I remember him at Mississippi State playing under Mike Leach and the boys, being really good out there and doing really well. And him going over to USC, I would say he had a pretty decent year. I wouldn't say he's like, I don't think he's gonna like light the league on fire. Neither do I think Caleb Johnson's gonna do the same thing. I think what people tend to forget when, and we'll get to how I evaluate players, but like people tend to forget, like you got to look at the pieces that was around Caleb Johnson, how much he was force fed because they had no passing game. So, you know, when you're getting the ball 1,000 times a game and you have one of the best offensive lines in the country, if not the best year after year, yeah, of course it makes you seem a little better, but I don't think he's, you know, when I look at Caleb Johnson, I have him so far down on my list compared to these other guys. Like, you know, if I had to go through the list right now, I think Ashton Jeanty's better. Somebody like Bashal Tutton from Virginia Tech is better. I think Brashard Smith from SMU's better. I think, you know, Damian Martinez, you know, Jaquindon Jackson, when he can stay healthy and that is actually consistent from Arkansas, I think he could be really good. You know, Jaden Blue, if he didn't have the fumbling issues, like I think there's so many more players that are better than, you know, these guys that are being put in the spotlight. And I think what people see is like they see the stats, and we'll get into that, and they see the stats and then they go absolutely crazy. And you know, we're gonna get into why you should ignore stats sometimes. Theo said, I understand it now. Thanks. Was just a little confused and thought it was a separate account. No. Yeah, you DM me just hit the DMs on Twitter. I've been very, very busy. I still have to get to a lot of other high school guys that have hit me up, but with draft season, I get really, really tied up with this stuff. So, but I think, you know, when we talk about guys that can benefit, you know, from the running back group, I'm gonna obviously say Dylan Sampson. I think he's really going to surprise people. You know, I've said this guy's name and I'll say it again. I think Curtis Rourke can be one of those guys that ups his stock very, very high if he goes out there and performs well. Look, I've been saying it all year. I think Curtis Rourke has probably the best arm talent out of everybody in this class. And I mean, a lot of people know how I feel about Seth Hennigan from Memphis and Dylan Gabriel. And I mean, I'm about to do an episode on Tyler Shuck, but I think Curtis Rourke and Jalen Milroe are probably the two that you look at on the combine list and you're like, those guys can increase their stats. And look, I might actually do a Sliders episode on just the misconceptions about Jalen Milroe. Like, you know, I always encourage, make your own opinion. Stop reading other people's opinion about stuff. I mean, of course, a lot of people that go to the scouting combine now, not the scouting combine, but like the Senior Bowl, are content creators and things like that. And it's great. Like, you know, I will never say anything bad about the Senior Bowl for giving us our first like media opportunity a couple years ago and doing this. But I think what you have to take with a grain of salt is like these are guys that are down there that have never coached, have never played, only content creators, and you know, haven't gone through like the scouting, you know, any scouting classes, or you know, just don't have the keen eye for what they're actually looking at practice. And that's when you get like the Mike Greens of the world, you know, blowing up guys. Like what's his name on the offensive line when he's a left tackle and he's playing right tackle and gets blown up from Mike Green. It's like, is that really a fair assessment? No, because you have a guy that's primarily playing left tackle, now playing right tackle, and then he gets blown up by Mike Green. So, but yeah, I you know, I obviously think Jalen Milroe got a really bad rap during the week, and it's not the fact. I mean, well, some of it warranted, absolutely, but again, let's not let the Senior Bowl. Let's allow the Senior Bowl and things like that to allow us to see talent that we've probably never seen in the spotlight, and then go back and watch the film to see how they are. It's kind of like how we did with Keon White. It's kind of how we did with like Byron Young from Tennessee. Like, you go back and you re-verify what those guys were able to do on the field, right? And then you kind of form your opinion from there. Like, don't let, you know, the opinions of others or things that you haven't done your research to supersede how exactly you feel about a player. Game film is everything at the end of the day. And I don't like the guys that leave the Senior Bowls and stuff like that and just go and do their own thing because they feel like they've done enough. I think a lot of people take the NFL team bait and they're like, well, you don't have to do anything. You've already proved yourself. Well, let's not take the entitlement here, sir, and you know, carry on with it. And I'm also say from the quarterback group, a name that I've grown very fond of the last couple years. And I think with his time at Wisconsin got a lot of bad rep, and rightfully so. He was terrible there. But having to deal with the Billy Napier stuff and having to take over for the slew of quarterbacks that have come from Florida, I think Graham Mertz has a lot to prove coming off of his injury this year too. And coming out to the scouting combine, it can maybe be one of those diamonds in the rough that like flies under the radar as well. So, you know, for the rest of these guys, I think as far as increasing their stock, I mean, Max Brosmer from Minnesota is very interesting to see, but you know, you never know. As far as the wide receivers are concerned, there is a lot of hype around Andrew Armstrong from Arkansas, and I get it. What's up, Torque? You know, I definitely get it. I think Alec Manor from Stanford is going to shock a lot of people, and I wish he would have showed up to the Senior Bowl as well. Like, I think he can really benefit from going to the, you know, obviously he's going to be at the combine, but he can really benefit from it, right? A sneaky name like Ja'Cory Brooks at Louisville, like, what you guys are going to learn is that them boys out of Louisville were not that great for Tyler Shuck. Being, you know, you're going to hear this on the Sliders episode, but these guys led the country in drop pass percentage. Not good. So obviously Ja'Cory Brooks is part of that slew of receivers that are coming from Louisville. He can obviously increase his stock as well. Another sneaky name like Bo Collins, right? Played most of his career at Clemson, transferred out to Notre Dame, tried to win a national championship with those boys and everything, and they just couldn't put it together. And he, you know, battled some injuries this year as well. Yeah, I think he's going to be one that can definitely increase his stock. And, you know, there was a lot of hype out of Bo Collins coming out of high school and going to Clemson, and just we haven't seen it. Ty Felton, man, when I say, and if you watched our video of like winners and losers from the Senior Bowl, he was definitely on the losers list, and I actually had him one of the highlight players, like written down in my notebook that I was excited to watch. Like, you know, I'm from Maryland. I want to see those guys do well. And from his Senior Bowl, from just dropping passes over and over and over and over and over and over and over, back to back to back. I think he dropped 4 in a row. And I was just, you know, again, you interview these guys and you try not to be partial because you interviewed them. But then at the same time, you got to evaluate, well, what's there on the field. I think Ty Felton is one of those guys that can really benefit by coming back strong for having a really good combine and also having a really good pro day. I think he's going to need both. I could talk all day about the wide receivers. Like, the list just goes on and on and on for these guys. But, you know, I think those are some guys that can obviously up their stock. And a guy that just needs all the help in the world is Arian Smith from Georgia. Man, I mean, had one good grab at the Senior Bowl that everybody was oohing on, and then the rest of it is just what we've seen over the years to be Arian Smith, right? I you know, maybe he can help out his stock. Who knows? Savion Williams is a popular name for everybody. but I've seen the Savion Williams has been booty cheeks as well. So I'll tell you, a lot of people are obsessed with his size and what he can be if he puts it all together. But you know, at this point in time, I think that's one of the things that I think people need to put in their tool bag is like guys that are constantly you have questions about. He could be good if well, he should have been good in his career, and what is separating him numbers wise from everybody else. And it's, you know, there's a lot of other guys that are way ahead of that list. Torque says, glad you've seen the Malachi Moore talent. Dude is legit. Dude, watching that film study, watching the 22, you know what I'm saying? Like in the game, you can't really, it's hard to focus on just one person, but when a guy stands out that much on the 22, bro, I have him as number one, as my number one safety. Just, it is what it is. Until proven otherwise, he's the number one guy. Torque says, obviously some off the field concerns right now, but Kyren Lacy is going to be a steal in my opinion. Oh man, his name might be wiped from existence of football, but I've been a Kyren Lacy guy, bro. When we watched the film last year, you know who surprised me more than Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas? It was him. I said, that boy gonna be a beast. And he was an absolute demon while they got him involved in the game and as much as he could stay healthy. Let's head over to the tight ends. I think a guy that in a stacked tight end class, because you're going to hear that Elijah Arroyo's coming in with the hype that he got, the Harold Fanta Jr.'s, of course, the Gunnar Helms, the Brant Kuithe, you know, Colston Loveland from Michigan, of course, Tyler Warren from Penn State, and then the hype that Mason Taylor got as well, coming off of, you know, not only who his dad is, but the way that he performed at the Senior Bowl. A name that just constantly has been in my head for a long time is a guy that transitioned from wide receiver into tight end a couple years ago, and that's Oronde Gadsden the second. His dad used to play wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins, if that name sounds familiar to you guys. But Rondé Gadsden lit up the world at Syracuse as a tight end. And, you know, I've always been super high on Rondé. Watched him in high school as well. And, you know, for him to do as much damage as he did as a tight end, it was, I think what you're going to see is he's going to separate himself. I think physically he's going to separate himself from a lot of guys. I want to see what his measurables are with everybody else, because I mean, these tight ends are big guys. Like, let's not get it twisted. But I think the playmaking ability that you're going to see from him, there's going to be a lot of oohs and ahs in the crowd for his playmaking ability, as far as his catch radius, the one-handed catches that he can make, the catch and go, the speed that he probably is going to possess. I think that type of stuff is going to, obviously the combine is going to help him out for sure. What's up, Jeff? Said the grind never stops. Never, man, never. Gotta stay consistent. Offensive lineman, man, offensive lineman it's probably the hardest to evaluate year to year. I'm not gonna lie. Offensive linemen, even though I'm an offensive guy, are probably like my least favorite to watch. But I think out of everything, these guys benefit the most from the combine by how athletic that these guys can be. I mean, Tyler Booker's getting a lot of hype now from Alabama, but I think moving forward that he can increase his stock. And one guy that I'm so curious on what his measurables are going to be and how well he's going to be able to do in these drills is obviously Will Campbell from LSU. Look, I've said enough times that, you know, while everybody else takes my take from watching these games, is his arms are just too short for me to trust that he can play tackle at a high level. And then you watch the film, and then there's a lot of times where it's just like, well, maybe he can. I want to see in the capacity of what the drills look like at an NFL level, of what those guys and what the meeting rooms and things like that are going to consider his mental and physical fortitude to be able to play tackle, because they're going to get in his head, and they're going to measure that in these drills, and it's going to be very indicative of I'm just curious of what the NFL teams feel like is going to be indicative of what he can do at this combine. And I honestly think the spotlight is on a lot of these LSU guys, man. I mean, they have 3 guys that are going to be down there. I mean, Will Campbell's going to be down there. Miles Frazier is going to be down there. Garrett Dillinger is going to be down there. So, you know, however the LSU boys are going to do is going to be the talk of the town. If they totally kill it, that's the group, that's the team that's going to have the most focus when it comes to the offensive lineman group. And as we know, you know, Texas has got their own guys coming down as well. You know what I'm saying? Cameron Williams and the Kelvin Banks Juniors of the world, and Jake Majors. Who else am I forgetting? I feel like I'm forgetting one more, but those guys are the ones that can compete with that group, right? So it's going to be all Texas and LSU, I think, all week long. Is what you're going to be hearing a lot from those two groups. And then Jackson Slater is one of those guys from a Sacramento State, coming from a smaller school, that obviously got a little bit of hype in the Senior Bowl, and he's going to be able to see how that translates over to the NFL Combine amongst his peers. And Carson Vincent, we got to see him a little bit, Alabama A&M guy at the Senior Bowl, so I'm glad to see that he got an invite. Very big guy, very fast, uses his hands great, and he stands in the pocket with the best of them. So wonder to see how he drills too. I'm just kind of, like I said, guys, I'm just kind of giving you a couple names that I think are, could benefit from, obviously, from the combine with the way that they test. Defensive linemen. I mean, I've talked about, several defensive linemen at this point in time. And I can say, my boy, like Darius Alexander, for example, he could really benefit from this. But a guy that we've talked about time and time again, and we've even predicted that a lot of people were going to start to see, and this is why you should get away from the stats, of course, is you're going to see a guy like Shamar Stewart start rising up draft boards even more after the combine, right? And I think he's going to absolutely kill those drills, and he would definitely be one of the guys that increases more, and that he's going to be able to benefit more, because right now we understand that he could played throughout the season. Stats weren't there, so a lot of people look at it like, oh, how good is this guy really? Well, having Nick Scorton and Shamar Thomas, Shamar Turner, his other teammate, the other Shamar, it definitely helps. And not everybody can eat, right? But maybe you were the one causing a lot of the destruction on the opposite side of the ball. And I think Shamar is one of those guys that is going to have that meteoric rise like the Trayvon Walkers, where did Abdul Carter, let me see. Okay, Abdul Carter got an invite. So you're going to be hearing Abdul Carter a lot from the defensive lineman group, and you're going to be hearing Shamar Stewart's name a lot. I think that's going to be 1A and 1B this week. And you could go into this draft, if one obviously tests better than the other, you can see Shamar Stewart might be the first guy off the board and not Abdul Carter. I think it could be similar to what Dylan Sampson is going to get. I think he's going to get that much of the hype that a lot of people thinks he should get. Obviously, you could look at the linebacker group and go down the line. I mean, Jalen Walker, Jeffrey Bossa, Eugene Asante from Auburn, who was absolutely the most self-deprecating linebacker I've ever seen at the Senior Bowl. Every time he did something bad, he's sitting there cussing at himself. Barrett Carter for Clemson, I know, is getting a lot of hype. One of our favorites, Jack Kaiser, is coming out in this class too. But I really think, and I don't know why so many people are down on Jay Higgins, but Jay Higgins, of course, can raise his draft stock back up. Why did it drop? I have no idea why people are not talking about it. I mean, again, not the sexiest linebacker in the class, just like Jack Campbell was, who was his former teammate. But one of those guys that can obviously increase his draft stock with how he comes out and does these drills in a couple weeks here. Again, why he gets so disrespected amongst his peers, I guess the world will never know. But you know, I think Jay Higgins is one of those guys that deserves to be at the top of everybody's board. And of course, when it comes to my linebackers, he hasn't moved off at number one because I know how destructive that he can be. And I don't know if he'll really consider Jalen Walker a linebacker or, you know, of course, they don't have edge rusher on here. I guess they're separating the list. And then last but not least, we get into the defensive backs. Hey, man, we've been talking about Malachi Moore and Malachi Starks and Sebastian Castro, Xavier Watts. You know, Siobhan Revel's been the cornerback that a lot of us like, but, you know, and they have Travis Hunter listed as a corner, and he's not coming in as a wide receiver. But I'm gonna tell you what, like, there's a lot of good names on this list this year, and I feel like the one that could raise his draft stock the most from a really good week is Malachi Moore. It's as simple as that. I don't think he's getting the hype that he deserves. I mean, at this point in time, it's Malachi Starks or nothing when it comes to the safety group. And everybody knows how we feel about Nicky Manwari from South Carolina. I mean, that dude could possibly be the best safety in this class out of everybody if he puts it all together. I mean, from the size, the way he hits people, the way that he can dissect the defense, the way that he can play off and on ball. I just don't think he's as sideline to sideline as he'd like a strong safety to be from like a Malachi Moore standpoint. But I think Malachi Moore is not getting enough hype that he absolutely deserves, and that itself can increase his draft stock for sure. Is coming out in the combine and definitely killing it against what I consider to be a very, very talented group. Look, man, you could look at the names up and down of the NFL combine this year, and you could say, my goodness, everybody's talented all over the place. And then everybody looks at the quarterbacks like they're just like somebody stole their lunch money. But I think this year, with every single class of player, one person could have one good combine and supersede themselves up to the top. I mean, Alec Manor is just a good example of that. Like, when you look at Tetero and McMillan and him, those are the two guys that gave Travis Hunter so much trouble. But Travis is really good friends with Tetero McMillan, and he never said anything about Alec Manor last year that gave him the business when they played Stanford. So it's always hilarious to me that, like, when players don't get their just due.